Welcome to the Stewardship Leader podcast, brought to you by the Christian Stewardship Network. CSN exists to encourage, teach, and connect church and stewardship leaders to help them create and lead healthy stewardship ministries in their church. You can learn more about CSN at ChristianStewardshipNetwork.com. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Stewardship Leader. I'm your host, Leo Sabo. Today, we're going to talk about discipling those folks that are struggling. And we're going to define what that means, but I have with me my friend, Gregg Gless. He's the stewardship pastor of Generous Life Ministry at ResLife Church in Grandville, Michigan. Gregg, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, Leo. Glad to be here.
Well, you and I have been talking about this, and inside of kind of our stewardship movement and realm, we have these terms that we use: struggling, solid, stable, surplus. And these are identifiers for the people that are in our congregation. It's more of an internal term for us to be able to properly identify who we're ministering to, and then make sure that we have the right process to minister to those folks. So today we want to focus on the struggling. So why don't you begin with just defining what do we mean by struggling?
Yeah. So when we look at struggling, what immediately comes to mind is someone that is in the middle of a financial crisis. And maybe they've come to our church in hopes of receiving some financial assistance. And so this kind of would be a connection point through our benevolence type side of things. It could also just be people that are, maybe they haven't quite hit, like they're not in an emergency situation right now, but they're really, really close. Like they're operating upside down and borrowing money potentially to make ends meet, and just not able to make ends meet, and most likely are in a crisis situation when we come in contact with them.
Yeah, that's good. I also think sometimes they're hard to identify because not everyone that's struggling is going to the church asking for financial assistance or asking for help. And so sometimes those that are struggling should be saying something. They should be reaching out to the church leadership and say, hey, here's where I'm at. I'm not necessarily asking for financial assistance, but I am asking for a lifeline. Like, what do you have? How can you help me to figure this out? So that's what we want to talk about today. How do we disciple those that are struggling? There are real needs sometimes, very practical. I don't have money to pay for food, or I don't have money to pay my car payment, and my car is going to be repossessed, and then I lose my job, and you can understand the ramifications of all that. So sometimes it's very practical. Sometimes it's not that specifically. It's more of I'm in a season or in a mindset that I just don't know how to get out of. I have this maybe poverty mindset or something that's keeping me from being able to really make headway, to really get beyond this. Like I've always lived this way. My family seems to always have lived this way. And so we definitely want to look at this from a ministry standpoint. So tell us about this ministry at ResLife. How do you guys do that? What's the objective, and how long have you been engaged in this?
Yeah. So the way that in general that we have historically and still do meet with people that are struggling financially and they are reaching out to the church is we have deacons that they're available every Sunday morning. It's a team of deacons. There's one for every weekend of the month. So there's actually 5 teams, but because there's always a 5th Sunday, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're always available there so that anyone in the church knows, or anyone that's contacting the church, we can all have the same message. Hey, if you have a financial need, the first step is coming on Sunday morning, meet with a deacon. So what happens during that meeting historically was we'd fill out an intake form, collect some information, and we would later do a little bit of checking in the area to make sure this wasn't a person that was doing some church hopping, looking for different aid around the area. And then reach back out with the determination of were we going to help financially or not. And it was basically just, other than having them come to service after they met with the deacon, there really wasn't a lot of intentionality around discipling or, even maybe making sure this person is saved. So there was a group within the deacons that really had more of a heart for mentoring / discipling. So about 4 years ago, we started meeting with this group that is kind of like our Deacon Team 5 now, which is kind of a mentoring team. And through the process of meeting for about 6 to 8 months, we put together and launched a ministry that we call ResLife. It's a discipleship mentoring ministry. ResLife is all about this idea of walking with someone, building a relationship with them, going through real life with them for a season. So our mentors are basically committing, and so are the participants, of meeting weekly for 12 weeks. Why we did that is, number one, some of those deacons and myself personally, because I joined the team 5 years ago, was like, we need to do more than just write checks or not write checks. If they're coming in the house of God, we have an opportunity to minister to these folks and really help them. And thankfully, there were some folks here that also had that same heart. So, and around that time too, because we were looking at how can we do it better or do it well, and we got connected with the Chalmers Center, and they have some work around how to help without hurting, or ways to help without really injuring those people, like without actually helping them to develop the skills, coping skills, decision-making skills that they're going to need in the future, maybe when they run into some similar situation. Right. And really make a change and really maximize their personal responsibility, and connecting them with God in a way that they're seeing God show up, and that we're really stepping out of the role of provider, whether we're writing a check or not. Are we just swooping in and kind of saving them out of a situation where they really could learn and change, that isn't maybe as urgent as what it feels like on their end. So, so that's what it was birthed out of. And for real life, other than it just being like, we're going to actually get in the nitty gritty and talk about real life, it's actually an acronym. And our volunteer leader who oversees this ministry, he really hates acronyms. He has a social work background. And he's like, we have so many acronyms, we don't need any more. But he just felt like this was too good. So as a group, we came up with the 4 elements that make up this real life program. The R is for relationships. And that's what we learned from the Chalmers Center, is that when you talk with folks that are in poverty, it's not always the financial need that they feel the most. It's kind of the shame around it. And also it's kind of a poverty around relationships. So what we've done with our deacons, and also over on the real life side, is we're going to do everything we can to connect that family with as many people as we can within the church anytime they're in the building. So if our deacons finish meeting with someone, their goal is to learn something enough about that person to point them to a different ministry, introduce them to a different person. Maybe it's our first time guest group. Maybe they have a certain background or do a certain type of work. We're just going to work on introducing them even to just another average Joe that goes to our church that we know that has a similar background, because we feel like the more relationships that we can help build, the better. So the R is relationship for real life. Then the E is all about encouragement. So once we built a relationship with them, and that's why we do it over 12 weeks as well, is we got to build trust and relationship over time. And a great way to start that is to encourage them. Hey, number one, we can set some goals, and we're going to help them set goals that they want to set, and then help walk with them, encourage them to meet their goals. So we really have to hold back on setting the goals for them, So that's part of the training and coaching. So, but we want to encourage them that they can. And that encouragement, I think, is something that that is super valuable in this day and age. If you can go around somebody that's encouraging to you, oh my gosh, you'll show up every week, I think. You don't get that everywhere you go.
That's right.
Then the A in real is accountability. And this is where it kind of comes up a little bit like the tough love side. Okay, I'm going to encourage you that you can accomplish your goals, but I'm also going to hold you accountable, because it's your goal that you set, and I want to help you get there. And I know you can get there, because the goals that we're setting, they are going to be achievable. You just have to do the action steps. So if we love them enough, we'll tell them the truth in love and hold them accountable to what their goals are and what they said they would do and what they committed to. And I think that's what real love looks like, not some kind of, letting things slide kind of an attitude, but it's with the right heart, right? It starts with relationship. And that brings us to the L in real, and that's love. It's all kind of wrapped around in this thing of unconditional love. No matter what they do, we're going to love you with the love of Jesus, but we're also going to commit to being there in relationship. We're going to encourage you, and we're going to hold you accountable. Yeah. So it was just too good to pass up. We just had to use real life.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love that you ended with love, but to qualify that to say, sometimes love is to hold you accountable, is to be, truthful and say your behavior, your lack of commitment, your lack of doing your part, it was going to keep you from your goals. And the most loving thing to do is say, if you don't do this, we can't help. There are certain things we can help with, but we can't do it for you.
And your situation won't change, right?
Yeah. Ultimately, to me, that's real love. Sometimes as parents or as Christians, we tend to think, well, we're just supposed to help people. Well, I want to define help, as you said earlier, actual help. It's the loving thing to do sometimes to correct someone. In fact, we have scripture on that, says that the word of God is there to also correct and train in righteousness, not just to provide the knowledge and the understanding. Because if we don't obey it, if we don't listen to it, if we don't apply it, then really we're just fooling ourselves. So I know that benevolence is a difficult ministry. This is something that I have overseen at the church I worked at for a while, and in my opinion, I would say it's one of the most difficult ministries in the church, because it is a lot of time, and it's walking through life with people that are, sometimes they don't see where they're falling short. And it's obvious to you, at least you think you know, but they don't see it. So to change that mindset, to really kind of take them from where they are, where they need to go, it's a lot of work. And it could be very difficult, emotional, relational work. But having a process is so important. And then setting that up as a this is what we're going to do. This is what you're agreeing to. So important. So I love everything you described about it. So talk more about how the mentoring side of the ministry runs.
Yeah. I would just throw out there too that when we're training our mentors and talking with them, is just kind of helping them define what a win looks like. And it's
Mm,
mostly about your effort to be real with them, and
yeah.
show them love, and to show up consistently. Because sometimes folks are just not used to, number one, having somebody that's encouraging, but somebody that shows up consistently when they say they're going to.
Yeah.
And that's a huge piece for building that relationship, is just if you can connect them to people that have a Christian background, worldview, that have seen how to live in a way that can bring you from out of struggling into stable and solid, and going forward. Is the more people that you can connect them with that have that same view, just the more chance of success that they're going to have to break free from any old mindsets or ways of thinking, or people that they currently have relationships with that they've seen how to do life. They can look very different, that
Yeah.
might be causing them to struggle. But yeah,
Yeah.
so how we do it is when we bring someone in for mentoring, we offer the mentoring. It's every Wednesday night. We have a Wednesday night service that starts at 6:30. So we invite the mentors and the mentees to meet every Wednesday night at 5:30, so an hour before service. We provide a meal for the mentors, the mentees, and their family, so they can bring their kids and we definitely, if they're spouses, we want both of them to be there.
Sure.
But so everyone can share a meal together. We've worked it out with our child care ministries that the kids can be dropped off early,
Mm,
and so that the parents and the mentors can meet and have some quiet time to meet for that hour. During that hour, and we can come back to a minute about how someone gets onboarded, what that looks like. But once it's kind of rolling a little bit and they're meeting with their mentor, they're going to review kind of what their action steps were for the last week. Then that will kind of tell them, hey, are we on track? What do we need to talk about? And then setting kind of what the next goal is for the next week. Is there anything we can be in prayer about? And then, kind of wrapping it up. And then potentially one of the homework pieces might be going to the service that night. It just depends. It's crafted, based on what's going to be the most helpful in the mentor's eyes. So the way it's laid out is our mentors, they have oversight. So our deacon team number 5 is the oversight for our mentors. So occasionally the oversight will do some mentoring, but most of the time we're trying to have the mentors do the mentoring, and then each of the mentors has an oversight assigned to them. So whether it's during a one-on-one meeting or during their mentoring session, they have a question, or following it, there's always an opportunity for the mentor to get support. And I think that's super important because,
yeah.
again, like you mentioned, Leo, the population you're dealing with and the types of conversations you're having, they can be very difficult. They can be super emotional. It can be really challenging. And it's always important that we do it together, that we're bouncing ideas off each other. So we run that program. The mentors, they commit to the 12 weeks, like I mentioned. It's a rolling start. We run it year round. It doesn't stop. And the mentors basically commit and let us know when they finish their 12 weeks, they can take time off. Actually, we kind of almost like demand that they take some time off because it is pretty challenging
Mm-hmm.
ministry. And then we kind of figure out with them, when can they plug back in and be assigned a new mentee? And then we just kind of keep working that process. Now, when someone comes in and meets with a deacon on a Sunday morning, and let's say the deacon does recommend real life, then what we'll do is we'll let the real life oversight know that that's been recommended, so that we can be on the lookout for that family on that Wednesday night.
Mm,
Hopefully we can greet them by name, or have some information on them. We'll greet them at the entrance to the church. We'll walk them down to where the food is, help them get their kids checked in, and get them walked down to where the mentoring happens.
Mm.
We don't ask for any kind of RSVP or anything. They can just show up. But we do always have one of the deacon oversights runs what we call a first time or a welcome table. So if it's your first time there, whether you're a potential mentor or you're a mentee, you would come to that first time table, just show up, stop and grab dinner and come down and hear kind of an overview of what the program is all about. Now, from a mentee standpoint, if they are interested in being assigned a mentor, then they would go ahead and fill out an intake form and an agreement that basically says they are agreeing to be held accountable, to show up every week. They're committing to come for 12 weeks and all those things. And it kind of outlines some of the benefits that the people earn by attending Real Life too. There's some financial incentives that they earn by coming and completing their homework each week.
I like that. Yeah. Rewards and incentives are always important, especially in this kind of process. So I think you briefly touched on it, but maybe you can, or if you want to go a little bit deeper on how do you actually train and support the mentors? You talked about the support, that they always have someone, an oversight. So you don't need to go into that any further, but how do you actually train them? How do you know if they're going to be a good fit for this kind of ministry? Because it is a difficult one.
Yeah. So both myself and there's one couple in particular that is kind of like the volunteer leaders of the deacon team there for this group. We'll interview each person that says, hey, yeah, I'm interested in becoming a mentor, assuming there's a good match there. And we talk about, our style, that we're not really looking for handouts. We want to maximize their personal responsibility. Just make sure there's a good match. If there is, then they'll go through a onboarding training. And that's a 2-3 hour coach training so that we're all on the same page. And then from there, what we'll usually have them do is kind of ride shotgun and kind of just sit in on a full session with current mentors that we know are doing a good job.
Yeah, that's good.
And then once everybody feels comfortable that, hey, they can be assigned their own mentees, then we'll go ahead and do that. And then we do, usually about every 6 months, we'll do an ongoing training where we'll gather the volunteers to kind of celebrate what's, some of the testimonies and things that have happened through the program. Then also open it up for folks to share, what was a challenge. Maybe there's some ideas from other mentors that are part of the group that they have an approach or had an ability to redirect something that worked really well. So we have opportunities to share then. And then if there's any specific things that leadership has learned and wants to make sure that we share about, we'll go ahead and share a concept or an idea or some updates then as well.
That. Yeah, some ongoing training and opportunity to grow, obviously, because that is important for the person that's going. And things do evolve. You learn from doing this ministry and you learn what's working better than what used to not work or whatever. And so you can adapt. And speaking of challenges, you mentioned that you do discuss those. What's been the biggest challenge?
So really the biggest challenge is finding the right balance between mentors and mentees. It's kind of been interesting. When we first launched the program, it's just over 2 years ago now. We had a lot of mentees, a lot of folks that needed mentoring, because I don't know if at your church it was similar to this, but we kind of had some regulars, if you know what I mean, coming through benevolence.
I do.
So that whole group, especially that first year, went through mentoring. And it was because the ministry was newer, we didn't have as many mentors. And now we have a really great team of mentors. But honestly, now we are not seeing the same demand of mentees, because once you've gone through Real Life, pretty much you're not going to go through again unless it makes sense. I mean, we don't have anything written in stone. Everything's guidelines. But most of the time, it doesn't make sense to do it again. So just finding that balance, although I would say that the Lord has been really faithful. It's interesting when a mentor becomes available and a new mentee comes through, just how a lot of times their histories are very similar. They've overcome similar challenges, just the faithfulness of God to make those connections. And we're thinking, okay, that makes us look really good, but really it's not us at all. And it just works. But there's been other times things explode. We've had to have security come down and break up what was about to turn into fights a couple times. And, it's just, it's real life. That's what we always say. It's just real life.
Yeah, really living up to its name. I get it.
Right.
It can be challenging. Obviously, people are at a very difficult and stressful situation. So I can imagine, especially if, sometimes between husband and wives, that could definitely be a challenge.
This This episode of the Stewardship Leader podcast is sponsored by Simple. Simple supports your mission so you can focus on your ministry. Through tailored guidance, analytics, and custom giving software designed for Rock RMS, we help you find more time to direct community impact, deepen followers' faith journeys, and develop an enduring culture of generosity in your church. To learn more about us, visit us online at simpledonation.com.
So you mentioned that you have a good team. Very, very grateful for that. And then the mentees seem to be manageable. So how many people do you usually serve in, let's say, in about a year's time?
Yeah, so I would say probably in a year's time around 100 to 120 people. That first year was higher than that, but that's probably about the run rate right now. There's usually about, 12 to 15 people being mentored any given Wednesday night, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, it's good.
It's been a little bit lower here recently. I don't know if it's summertime, but right around there.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think that if you're doing this well and people go through it and they are actually, doing their part and they succeed, you're really overcoming some of those challenges that lead you to stay in that position in life, right? Always struggling, always. Because what I've learned as I've done some of this counseling and coaching is that with folks that are in a struggling position, sometimes it's generational, sometimes it's a mindset, sometimes it's something as simple as they've never been taught how to actually plan and stick to a plan.
True.
It could literally be just help me to have an idea of how to actually make a good financial decision. Because sometimes the culture that they were raised up in was one of lack. So as soon as they have money, they blow it because otherwise it's going to disappear. And there's so many different things that come into it. But so much of it depends on them. But they, like you said, they need the support. They need the relationship.
Just speaking of that whole idea of helping people to build a budget, and that's super, super important. There's two elements there that we've really tried to tune in on that we see makes a lot of impact. Is number one, helping them put together a plan or a budget. It's basically creating order out of chaos. Even just starting to put things on paper reduces the stress levels. I know you've seen that. Everyone listening has probably seen that. Once you start to put it down on paper and just get it out of the air where it can cause all this stress and fear, it's like, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. Usually the person that you're meeting with, they know the answer now. They can see it. So just helping somebody, that's a huge gift, I think, in making it concrete for them. But the other side is introducing them to tithing, because we know then that God can go ahead and get involved in their finances. And we were just talking about this as a team that I don't think we've had anybody come through yet that was a faithful tither that's come through and needed financial support. And I think that just speaks to the faithfulness of God and how important it is for people to honor God with your first and your best. That He actually does show up. Like I think is great proof of it.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing that, because I think leaving that off the table, especially with this group, you may be tempted to do that. You may be thinking, gosh, there's no way they can tithe, right? I mean, they're not even making ends meet. But that leaves God out of the equation, right? It leaves God unable to come in and fix what's broken. And we do need the favor of God. We need God's provision, but we also need the wisdom. And I think I remember this when my wife and I first started tithing. It's not that everything changed the next day, right? We didn't get more money. We didn't have, cheaper rent. None of that changed overnight. But what changed is our perspective and our attitude toward money. All of a sudden, because we were sectioning out that first portion, we had less to deal with. So now we have to think, okay, now we have to be more strategic. And that brought wisdom, that brought more understanding. It curbed some of that impulse spending. So many things are a byproduct of you putting God first, not to mention the supernatural, obviously, power of God being able to not only come in and provide in ways that you can't even imagine, but also to protect. I keep going back to Malachi, and some people cringe when they hear that. But what I love about that scripture is that it doesn't just say tithe. It says, test me because I will show you and I'll protect you and I'll, stop the devourer from eating your crops. And, all of that is part of it. And unless you experience that personally, if you've never taken the opportunity to tithe, and this group really needs to trust God that way, because otherwise it goes back to, I can't do it, right? I can't do it. I'm in a position where I'm not like other people. Other people have more opportunities. They have more education. You fill in the blank. And that's just a mindset that we need to change, to say, no, you're a child of God. God loves you. God can provide for you. just like you can provide for anyone else, but you have a role and you need to do your part. And so I love that you're doing that you're teaching the practical, which can be that light bulb, but then focusing on the fact that they need to put God in the center of it. If they don't, it's just an exercise of futility in the long run.
Right. We've missed a great opportunity too. If they've come into the house of God, that we've missed an opportunity not to share the gospel with them, really.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we have to remember that's what they're there for, is to meet the Lord, not just to get their budget in order. All right,
and we want them to have a testimony of the Lord, how He showed up in their finances and being real in their life.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the most powerful.
It's a game changer.
Yeah, it's the most powerful message they'll have in their life. All right, Greg. So a couple more things that I want to touch on before we end today. One, how effective has this program been, and how do you measure that success?
Yeah, well, Leo, from working together for years, I know the importance of measuring and surveying and everything. So when someone agrees, hey, I want to be mentored and be a part of the program, they fill out an intake form. And part of that intake form includes some information where they self-rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 5 on several different areas, like how motivated are they, how committed are they, how much confidence do they have around it, how strong do they feel spiritually right now, how much community support are they feeling, and, how financially stable do they feel. And they rate it from a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is things are a mess and 5 is they couldn't be better. And so we do that at the beginning before they do their first meeting with a mentor. And then on the very last week, on week 12, they go ahead and they fill out that again. And what we do is then we're able to compare those two, and just kind of, that gives us a pretty good feel from the participant standpoint, how much impact has been made. Yeah. And honestly, if people stick with it and go the full 12 weeks, it's just amazing the difference that is made. It's only 12 weeks, but a lot can be accomplished. You partner with God, people are taking action steps each week. There's just some remarkable testimonies that come out of it. It's been really good.
Well, God can transform people in a very quick period of time, and 12 weeks is plenty of time for Him to do it. So I love that you're measuring from their perspective. It's not just measures or data that you're thinking, well, I'm looking for these, but you're actually getting their perspective on it. And I think that's so much more a real measure of what's really happening. All right, a couple more things. How has this impacted the culture at ResLife? And then also the benevolence budget. How has that been affected due to this effort?
Yeah. So our mission statement at ResLife is to win souls and make disciples. And honestly, we've been really good at winning souls, but this has given us an opportunity to actually make disciples. Nice. Where you're actually going to walk with someone for 12 weeks. That is, and getting the nitty gritty, that is what making disciples looks like, I think. And what it's done is it's, for those that had a calling to do it, this was an answer to prayer for them. This was an opportunity to use their gifts and their calling in the kingdom at their local church and not needing to look somewhere else to do it. So it was really an answered prayer there. So people really feel like we are fulfilling our mission, which we are in a greater way, I feel like. Yeah. And it really too is kind of shifted our view on what helping people looks like, even to our senior leadership now. There's really has been a shift towards follow the program, even for people that can kind of ask regularly or have close relationships with some of those leaders, where it can get a little dicey sometimes. It's like, no, we just follow the process, because we've seen good success by following the process, where life change is happening. People aren't necessarily coming back to need help again and again, or the help looks different. And so now we're not just a check writing ministry. Now we're actually doing discipleship.
I love it. I love that you're protecting that process. Sometimes in the church context, especially around benevolence, I know this has happened, it happens at every church, so no one's going to be surprised by this statement, but sometimes someone knows someone on staff and they get kind of a special treatment to get to the front of the line to get that check. And I understand it from the pastor's position. They're trying to really meet this person's need. They have a relationship with them, and that person has a great story. Something's going on in their life. They're trying to help. But when you short circuit the process, you short circuit the result. And I love that you're protecting that, because sometimes staff, well-meaning, can actually harm rather than help someone by not letting them fully engage in the process and going through it, so that they can actually have that transformation happen.
Yeah. And it's been interesting with the overall budget. It's pretty much remained pretty flat. It's just where we're spending the dollars has changed. Instead of writing benevolence checks up front, it's more being delivered through like the meals and the other financial incentives that people are earning. So it really is washed out almost. It's been pretty remarkable how consistent it actually has turned out to be.
Yeah.
On the front end, it looked like it was going to be a huge addition to our benevolence budget, but in the end, it's turned out to be pretty much a wash.
Well, that's a great testament right there, because it says that you don't have to, when you put this together and you have this process, you're actually ensuring that the money that's being spent is being spent wisely, that it's stewarded well. And then the result is that you actually get a culture shift, an actual transformation of individuals to help them out of that situation. So excellent. I love it.
Interesting you would mention that. That is feedback that our volunteers, which, of course, are members of our church body, they've expressed that too, is just the wisdom and the stewardship around the use of funds this way feels to them a whole lot more effective, and they feel better about it using it this way versus just writing checks. And, the Chalmers Center really helped us with giving some language around this, like knowing the difference and helping to evaluate the difference between like a relief situation and more of like a like a disaster relief versus kind of being like a maintenance type of an issue where it's not really life threatening. It's just more of like something that doesn't require immediate attention. It's something they can work themselves out of. So this whole idea in the Bible where it says, if a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat. So that's kind of like, that tells us, okay, this is a situation that must not be like disaster relief scenario. Whereas the Bible also says, if you see a brother in need and don't help him, you're worse than an unbeliever. Right. So it's the same Bible. Well, what's the difference? Well, one must be an actual relief situation and the one is not. So if we have a widow in need, you better believe that we're not saying, hey, you have to walk through 12 weeks and blah, blah, blah. No, we're gonna jump right to the chase and help. So it's helped us have some language and a way of viewing what needs immediate help and what actually we can walk with them through a season.
Yeah, good stuff, man. I know we could probably talk about this much more, but I so appreciate you coming on and talking about this specific, because this is something that I would say every single church, no matter the size, has to get right. And it is, a struggle to try to figure out, how do you do it well? How do you actually help people so that you're not enabling them? And then eventually you're like, sorry, we can't give you anymore. And now it's like, oh, the church let me down. So there's so many landmines that you have to walk around to make sure that you're really caring for people and they see it as real help. Like saying no to something to them is actually helping them, loving on them, but staying connected, staying in a relationship, staying accountable. So I love that you've been so intentional about creating that, bringing obviously some really trustworthy mentors and your deacon team into it, so that it's not a staff only run thing, which is really, that's gold to me. That's so important not to make it a staff thing. And then creating all the measures to make sure that you're actually doing it right and constantly tweaking it to make sure that it's working and it's effective and it's impacting the culture there. Great job, man. I love it. If someone is interested in knowing more about this, what would you recommend?
Yeah, just reach out to me. I'd love to share. Yeah, just reach out. Awesome. I'm just Gregg at reslife.org.
All right. Well, you
Greg
heard
G,
it.
I should say. Gregg, any with 2 G's.
Oh, yeah. Gregg with 2 G's. So definitely. We'll put Gregg's contact information. Also, we'll also add a link to chalmers.org. Check them out. They are a great resource for churches. And they can give you, if nothing else, the language so that you know how to connect with this group, how to go forward. But they have a lot of products. So we definitely encourage them. We know many people that are part of our network of churches that have used them in various ways to build and run their own benevolence ministry. So definitely check them out. Gregg, thanks again for being with us. I appreciate your wisdom in this. I appreciate what you shared. I think it is very useful and valuable to those that are listening who may be in a similar situation trying to figure this out. So thanks.
Yeah, amen. Thanks for having me on. And I would encourage everyone, it's worth the extra effort to build those relationships and go deep with people that want to really take advantage of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so rewarding. So make that leap of faith, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for that encouragement. And thank you for listening to this podcast. We hope it was valuable, helpful. If it has been, please let us know by either reviewing this podcast and giving us a 5-star review if we've earned it. And more importantly, share it with someone so that more people know this resource exists. That's how we do it. It's a labor of love. We want to resource the church and those that are serving in the church in the specific area of stewardship and generosity. And we would love to also partner with you if you need any assistance in doing that. This content and similar like it is what we are all about. You can learn about that at christianstewardshipnetwork.com, where you can find not just resources and content, but also a community. people that love this topic, are serving in their churches in this area, and would love to come alongside you, just like Gregg just offered, to have a conversation with you, help you if you need it. That's who we are. We'd love to help you if we can do that. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time on Stewardship Leader.